I want to go around today and just document some of the growth that's happened here in this first growing season. This first year was really about observation and getting to know this place, getting some of my initial plants started. We've had spring and we've had summer. So back in spring, I planted these black currant cuttings in the ground here. Basically what I did is a sheet mulch with, a little bit of compost and some cardboard, paper, and then covered it with straw, and I did another layer of like wood mulch a little bit later. And I've sort of, as I've collected sticks and stuff, I just sort of put them around the edge. And if I swing around here, so we're looking down the row, there's a few black currants planted along there. They really haven't done all that much this year, and I wouldn't necessarily have expected them to, but I'm pretty happy with how they look. They survived the, we had a period in July that was very hot and dry, and I was a little bit worried about them. So I was, grabbing water from the rain barrel up there and putting it on them, and they all except one survived that. And so I'm pretty happy with that. But as far as black currants goes, this is not very big. Like, this is not a huge amount of growth, and so it'll be interesting to see. I wanted to just capture what it looks like after the first year of growth, and then we'll see what it looks like next year. Now that it's got its roots down, I think next year it'll do a lot better. But the big sort of issue that I'm dealing with here is just that the soil is incredibly sandy here, and it does not hold on to water very much. And so just sheet mulching and building up the soil, and it'll get better over time. Here's the one that died. When the rains came back, it looked like it was going to be fine, but it ended up dying. And so these currants were definitely close to the edge, because they're growing out in a big field that barely even supports grass. It's very sandy, and with a sheet mulch and regular watering, they have survived. There's one here and one here and one down there, and they're small this year, but it'll be really interesting to see what they do next year. They now that they've got their roots down. And you can also see I have skunks here that have been digging for insects in my sheet mulch here. So I don't know if it's that big of a problem. It's it is what it is, and they're getting food, so that's good. For 1 year of growth, that's pretty measly progress. So I think underground there's more happening, and they're just sort of getting their strength down, and hopefully that will show up in improved growth next year. Something that has done very well are these fennel plants that I started from seed. There's 2 of them, and they grew actually way better than I thought they would. So that's pretty exciting. And I had a squash that I put in that actually it looks like some deer came through and ate some of the leaves. But a lot of what I was doing this year was just sort of testing the soil to see what can actually be done, because I wasn't sure if anything would happen with these squash, and it actually performed better than I thought it would, given how dry and sandy it is here. So I think with a little bit more fertility, I think the squash will do a lot better. But it's kind of, I think about it as kind of like a way of testing the soil to see how it responds. Something that's kind of interesting is anywhere I see these roses growing, I've left them. This one's growing next to one of my fennel plants and the squash and a black currant, and it actually has rose hips on it. That's pretty impressive that a plant this small was able to grow rose hips, and that's kind of cool. Another thing that happened this year, I did get not a bad crop of peas, and you can see the dead vines here. They didn't make it up as high as I would have liked, but again, it's because of the the sandy substrate here, and so I've been just doing some mulching around where I'm doing planting, and I've actually got these are actually seeds that I collected this year from the peas that were growing here, and so when the rains returned, I just sowed another set of peas, and these will grow all the way through till winter. I built this little wood structure here to basically hold back the mulch, because this slope here is quite significant, and when the rain comes, it flows down and it doesn't really hold on to the water. So I wanted to just sort of slow it down. It's not obviously going to stop it, but just to capture mulch and debris and fertility that comes off of this little hill here, and create a little pocket for these peas to grow. So that'll be an ongoing sort of thing. My hope is that eventually I'll be able to grow peas and beans and just vining crops that go all the way up to the top there and have just a big wall of green. I think that would be really cool. And yeah, so we made it up to, I think, about the third or fourth rung this year, and so yeah, we'll just keep watching it and see how it improves in future years. That's one of the things I really like about this, is starting from such rough soil, we'll really get to see how it changes and evolves as time goes on. So if I zoom back and show you the overall landscape, you can see it hasn't really changed all that much this year. There wasn't a lot of stuff that I planted. This all the way down here I found a big patch of yarrow, and all throughout the lawn there are these patches of yarrow and clover and stuff like that. So I just mowed around them, and they bloomed like crazy. Brought in a lot of good insects, and just sort of building on something I was talking about in the last video when I did an update on this. Just noticing what your landscape already has that you can work with, and building on that, so that rather than working against what the land wants, you just sort of go with what it wants. And these, I actually found there was this whole set of shrubs right on this spot right here that just randomly popped up, and I think they're actually the same thing as this, whatever this is. And rather than mowing them, I just decided to let them grow, and they will, I can either keep them there if I want to keep them, or I can use them for chop and drop mulch. I can feed them to other plants, and it's just, I'd much rather have a shrub growing than just bare grass. And it'll help with the water retention and just building the soil over time. So I found another nice patch of blueberries right in the middle of this field here. So, mowing around them. And those black currants are going all down this line here. Somebody was asking me recently about how do you actually look at an environment and tell when it's balanced. One of the indicators that I look for, I started noticing a few days ago that this fennel plant, even though the plant is growing very healthy, and I'm actually thrilled with how the fennels are doing, you can see in here, there's like a caterpillar. Here, there's a caterpillar. They're all stuck together and with like webs, and if you look carefully inside these ones that are all stuck together, there's caterpillars in them. And this plant is actually really infested with caterpillars. And it's not really going to affect the growth of the plant. I mean, the plant is pretty healthy. I'm not worried about it dying or anything like that, but it might not get seeds because they're sort of moving in at that phase after the flowering is done. And while this plant is trying to make seed right now, the caterpillars are really attacking it. And so this is just something where it's growing pretty much just in a lawn, and so there isn't any habitat for predators. There isn't, a lot of diversity in the plant life and the places for other types of insects that might help to balance out this caterpillar infestation. And so as we're growing things, and we want to say, and we want to notice, is our landscape balanced in terms of the ecology? What is the balance of our landscape? Is it healthy? This is the sort of thing that we can look for. We can make a simple observation like, hey, there's tons of caterpillars over here. And then that can be something that we can use as a point of comparison for the future. So what I would expect is that as we get more plants growing here, and as I bump up the diversity and I get more places for predators to live, that the fennel will start to grow a lot more healthy, and there just won't be as much pressure from these caterpillars. The other thing that'll happen is as the soil improves in its quality, the plant itself will get better nutrition and will have better resistance to pests. And so we can, it's not about saying that this is good or bad. I mean, the caterpillars are part of the system too, but when they have a crushing effect on a seed crop, then we could certainly call that an imbalance, and we can use that to sort of guide how we decide to improve this landscape, by adding in a more variety of habitats and plants. I mentioned this in another video, that I had this box here where I was growing potatoes and in oak leaves, and I really didn't know if it would work. I wouldn't say that it's worked all that well. Partially that I think maybe the actual seed potatoes I used were not the greatest quality, but we did have one come up, and I've been adding oak leaves as it grows, and so we'll see what actually comes out of this. The main reason I wanted to do this was to have something to do with the oak leaves, so they can break down in here and actually become like a little potato tractor or something, where you grow it here one year, fill it up with leaves, let the leaves break down, and then I can move this in future years and use it to build up the soil in key locations. And so that's the thinking behind this. I put these little chicken wire on here because when the winds would come, it would sometimes blow leaves out, and so I find that if I put these on, it captures the leaves, and so they don't blow away. And so it seems to be working pretty good. I'm excited to see what it looks like in future years. I think that's kind of like the theme of this year, is just looking forward to future years, because there's just so much lawn right now that it does create this sort of imbalanced habitat for and opportunities for pests to get going, and so we'll see how it goes in future years. Over here by the rain barrel, I have put in the elderberry. I think I showed this in another video. This was started from a cutting, and again, just like the black currants, it hasn't really grown all that much this year, but it's getting a chance to put its roots down. You can see, it's only a few inches high, and so it'll be cool to see what it does next year. I also had a question from somebody asking why I am choosing to grow my shrubs in pots for the first year. Why not plant them in the ground? And the reason for this, I don't know if it's necessarily the best way to do it. A lot of this is just me experimenting and doing what makes the most sense to me. But having them in pots makes it a lot easier for me to control the soil conditions that they're growing in, and to keep them watered. If they're in these plastic pots, they hold on to the moisture a lot better. If I had transplanted these when they were really young, and having like undeveloped root systems, and just put them right into that super sandy substrate that I have down in the growing area, I think I would have lost most of them in that heat wave that we had a little while back, when things were really dry. And so using this, I've been able to keep them well watered. They've mostly done really well with just the rainwater from my rain barrels, and it gives them a whole year to go through their growing cycle. And so when a plant first comes up, and I do have a few seedlings that are started here, it's like leafy growth. It's very green and tender, and it's very susceptible to heat and being burned by the sun. And it really doesn't have a very well developed root system at this point. And then it goes into this phase where there's, it's growing a little bit more. It's still somewhat tender, but it's a little bit stronger. And but if you look at the stem, it still has not really started developing wood on it yet. And when you start getting into, later in summer, we start to find that, these shrubs, they really have a good woody structure to their stalks, and this strength in the plant, just having a really good strong trunk to the plant, that's gonna be represented in the roots as well. These plants are gonna have much better root systems, and so when they start to go dormant in fall, and the landscape is really hydrated, and at that time when the plants are, they're going dormant, and so they have more resiliency to having their roots moved around. And I can then take these plants, and this fall I will move all of these plants out into their permanent positions out in the growing space, and then they will overwinter out there, and next spring, hopefully, they will come back to life, and they'll grow. And so, we'll see how it goes. I might still lose some of them, but as long as I can get some of them to survive from each species, I'm pretty happy, because then I can multiply them, and I can move them out with cuttings and that kind of stuff. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a taste of what's been going on here. And I think the theme of this first year was really observation, finding what the land already has to offer in terms of blueberries, and there's a really nice wintergreen patch down there. Getting to know what it's like in those heat waves of, July, when things are really at their driest and hottest, and what do I actually have the capacity to keep alive during that time? Because there's no point in planting a bunch of stuff and then having it all just die on me because I'm not able to take care of it. And so it felt good to just keep those black currants alive. I'm like really happy that the black currants stayed alive. So yeah, getting a baseline on what is our starting point for the plants. What does it actually look like when you put a squash seed in the ground in this landscape? Do you get a full, really well growing squash plant, or do you get just a struggling squash plant, which is kind of what I got. The squash are struggling. If you're struggling to grow squash, that's a sign that you need some improvements in fertility. And what happens when you put a black currant in the ground, and you get to see that grow, and you get to see what it does in its first year. And all of this gives us a point of comparison for what happens in the second year and the third year, and we can use this as a way to, you know, almost think of it as like feedback from the soil, feedback from the landscape, that these plants are actually telling us what they need, what they're lacking, and you know, or if it's not specific, if they're not telling us specifically what they're lacking, they're just telling us that they're lacking something. It's fascinating to me how well fennel grows here, because at the previous place that I lived, with the clay soils, fennel did not grow well there. I always had difficulty getting fennel started and having it grow and survive through the winter. And here in the exact same growing zone, I mean, the temperatures get actually even a little bit colder here in winter. Fennel seems to be growing extremely well here, and it might be because of that sandy soil. So you know, I think a lot of just testing, you know, what works well, what doesn't work well, and then we can use that as feedback for making improvements in the future. And really, I think the main thing I wanted to get in this video was just to document the growth on those black currants, because I think it's going to be interesting to come back in future years and look at just how poorly they were growing in this first year, and to be able to see how that growth improves as time goes on, I think will be really interesting. So thanks for tuning in. I know it's a little bit slow at this point in the first year, but we're laying some foundations for just, you know, I really just want to document the process from the very start and get to see that transformation of the soil and how things start to grow and actually balance out as time goes on, to see how the plants become, you know, they start out a little bit stunted, they start out maybe susceptible to pests and things like that, and then we get to see how, as time goes on and we add more diversity and get more, you know, mulch and compost and soil built up, how things will come into fertility and production and resistance to pests and disease and all that kind of stuff. We're going to see the landscape become much more lush and fertile, and bringing, you know, providing food and storing water and all that kind of stuff. At least that's the plan. That's what I'm working towards, and getting feedback from the land as we go along. So really important. I mean, if you are growing stuff in your place, if you're, you know, planting shrubs and getting gardens started, it's a good idea to just take a little video to document where things are at, you know, in your starting point, because you know, 5 years down the road, you might forget just how bad it was when you started, and that can be really encouraging to go back and see, like, wow, it really does make a difference to move the landscape through the stages of succession into perennial abundance. You know, having a perennial system, like a food forest, that is providing nourishment for you and your family without taking like a ton of work, and without taking, you know, large inputs of fertilizer and pesticide and all that kind of stuff. That we can do it in a very organic, sort of natural kind of way that comes from just observing nature and working with the patterns of nature rather than against the patterns of nature. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you found it interesting, and I will keep you posted. The next update on this might be next spring, when things start to wake up. We'll see. I might do something in fall. Really, all I have left to do this year is apply a little bit of compost and put the shrubs that I started this year, like last winter, get them into the ground in their final positions, and then yeah, we'll get to see it all wake up again next spring. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.